Hello, welcome to this channel. My name is Janet. I'm working through the King James's Bible. Today I'm in the book of Samuel, the first book, and working through chapters 21, 22 and 23 today. So these are summaries of each chapter, and if you're ready, we'll get started. So yesterday in chapter 20 we learned that King Saul was definitely wanting to kill David, his sidekick who had helped him, who had beaten Goliath, and now his jealousy has just overtaken him and now he wants to kill David because he's jealous of his successes. So David has now fled from Saul and he has gone to the town of Nob where he meets with the priest there called Ahimelech. Now the priest was afraid that David was there because it was unusual. He's well known, David. Why is he there on his own? So he asks him, why are you here on your own? Now David lies and he tells the priest that Saul has sent him on a secret business trip and that he's sent his men into various places. So it's like he's not really alone, he's saying. His men are out there. He's just visiting this priest on his own. Now David was hungry at this stage because he's been out fleeing from King Saul. He's now here and he asks the priest if he can have 5 loaves of bread or whatever is on hand. And the priest says only the showbread is available. Now the showbread is something that was used in the tabernacle that's always fresh and is placed in there for God. And Ahimelech, the priest, needs to know if David and his men are clean, obviously, because this is food from the holy tabernacle, so they can't just give it to anyone. And so to pass it on, he has to know that they are clean, they haven't slept with any of the women. And David assures Ahimelech that they've been out for 3 days, they've been nowhere near any women. So Ahimelech gives him the showbread that was on display yesterday, passes that to David for him and his men. Now we are told that the servant Doeg, who is an Edomite and he's a servant to the king Saul, he is present that day and he sees David in Nob talking to the priest. Now David asks the priest for a sword or a spear because he said due to him having to leave with such urgency on behalf of King Saul, he's left his weaponry behind. And Ahimelech the priest says, well, we've got Goliath's sword, the one that you won. And David's like, perfect, I will take that. So he takes Goliath's sword with him. David then flees to Gath. And he goes to the king there, Achish. Now the king there is a Philistine. It's their enemy. What is he doing there? And the servants of King Achish recognize David because obviously he's killed Goliath. He is well known now in the area. And thus he finds himself in a predicament. I think he didn't think he would be recognized. And he's kind of like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Because he's in enemy territory. So then David starts acting all crazy, like he's gone mad, and he starts foaming at the mouth and like saliva goes down his beard and he's scratching at the gates and he's like acting all crazy. And the king sees this and he's like, this man is crazy. So even if they had recognized him, they might not actually think it is him, and the king wants rid of him. So the plan worked. And that closes chapter 21. So David then leaves the king's area, gets out of where the Philistines are, and he escapes and he goes to the cave of Adullam. Now, Adullam means refuge. So all of a sudden, David was this amazing warrior. He's been alongside King Saul, and now he finds himself like a fugitive in this cave, alone. But the great news is that his brothers and his father hear about this, where he is, and they go to him, along with those in distress, in debt, and anyone who's discontent with their life. So he ends up with 400 men around him, and David became captain of these men. Because it's like those who are not feeling maybe worthy and feeling that, and they want to go to somebody who is like they see him as good and they want to stand alongside him. Now David next takes his parents to Mizpah and to the king Moab there to live with him whilst he does God's work. Obviously, if he's got somebody like King Saul who wants to kill him, his enemy is the Philistine, he doesn't want his parents all wrapped up in that, so he's putting them into a safe place, a safe haven with King Moab. Then next, a prophet by the name of Gad. tells David he is to depart to the land of Judah. And so David left and went to the forest of Hereth, which is in the area of Judah. Now, because David has a lot of men around him, it's not long before Saul's messengers find out where David is. Now we go to Saul, who is aware now that David has men around him, and he is holding his spear and he is getting angry at his servants, and he's saying, will the son of Jesse give you vineyards and fields and thousands of men to lead? You've all gone against me. He then goes on to say that no one told him of the covenant that his son made with David, and that Jonathan, which is his son, stirred up the trouble with him and David. So he's just getting really delusional, King Saul. He's getting into this self-deprecation, like everybody's against him. Then Doeg, remember the Edomite who saw David with the priest in the town of Nob? And he stirs up things even more. He says, I saw David with the priest Ahimelech. He was there, he gave him bread, and he also gave him the sword of Goliath. So you can imagine how angry now King Saul's got. He was already angry, but now Doeg's just lit the fire even more. And now he's saying, right, bring the priest Ahimelech, and bring all the other priests with him from Nob to me now. And there's Ahimelech in front of him, and he says, why did you go against me with David? And Ahimelech honestly says, look, I didn't know you guys had fallen out kind of thing. He told me he was on business for you, private business. I gave him some bread because he said his men were out there and he needed weaponry because he'd forgot it. So that's what happened. Now, Saul doesn't believe the priest at all because he's in this state of mind where he's just jealous and he thinks everybody's against him, and so he cannot see the truth for what is going on in his mind. So he tells his servants to kill not only Ahimelech the priest, but every other priest there as well, and they refuse. They're not going to kill the holy men. So he turns to the servant Doeg, who was the one who brought them all to this point, and he kills them. But he goes even further. He goes to kill their families, their children, and their animals. He's just pure evil. But one priest manages to escape, and that is the son of Ahimelech, and his name is Ahitub. And he escapes and he flees to David. And he tells him what's happened, that they have been killed. All of these men have been killed because Doeg had seen you, and this is what has happened. And David obviously must feel terrible, I'm so sorry this has happened. I can't believe I brought this all upon you. Please stay with me. I will protect you and keep you safe. And so the priest joins his camp, and this closes chapter 22. Now here we move into where the Philistines are fighting. There's war raging and they're going against the town of Keilah. And the Israelites went to David for help, not Saul. They see him obviously more as a saviour than they do their own king. So David goes to rescue them with God's alliance. He has this strength around him with God. And David saves all the people of Keilah from the Philistines. Now Saul hears of David being in Keilah and this victory that he's had over there. But he believes God has delivered him into his hands, because in Keilah, it's kind of like an enclosed area, could really lock him in, and he's like, ha ha, I have got him. So he calls his men to besiege David. Now this isn't a war between the Philistines, it's a war of self-interest. Saul alone, it's his own war really, and he's using his men to bring about something that is really not part of God's plan for sure. Now David gets word of Saul's attack, that he's coming to get him, and he asks the Lord, he tunes into the Lord and he says, should I stay or should I go? And the Lord tells him to go. It's obviously not a safe place, Keilah, because of these gates and bars there. They could easily be trapped. It's not a place he's going to be successful. So he listens to the Lord, David, and he leaves. So David goes into the wilderness and Saul pursues to find him. In the meantime, David is in Ziph, in a forest. That's where he ends up. And Jonathan meets him there. This is Saul's son, Jonathan. He meets him there and he confirms Saul won't win. It's like he's giving him this reassurance. He knows he's not going to win. You'll become king of Israel and I'll be alongside you. And they make this covenant, and then Jonathan returns home. So it's like Jonathan's gone out there to give him this extra hope and this extra spark of light so they can continue on his journey with success. So the Ziphites go to Saul and they tell him, look, David is in our land, he's in our area. Saul then blesses them and wants confirmation of where he definitely is, and then he'll go and get him. So Saul sets off to find David, and David is in the desert of Maon. And Saul is in fast pursuit. So you can just imagine they're not that far behind. And all of a sudden, there's only a mountain in between the two of them. He's getting so close into capturing David. But the Philistines start war in Saul's land. And he gets word of this and he turns back and he goes back to fight that war. So, phew, David is safe. He doesn't get attacked by Saul. He manages to move on. So what a relief, such a close call, almost caught. And this closes chapter 23 and our 3 stories for today. So we started with David on the run, but he was on his own. But now he's on the run and he's got more people around him. He's building momentum, he's got men around him. And he had a close call there with Saul almost towards him. But divine intervention happened and the Philistines actually helped out and took him away. It's just crazy though that they've got their own war going on with the Philistines and there's this other internal war with Saul creating such havoc among his people. So let's hope it gets resolved eventually. We will find out when we pursue more chapters within the book of Samuel. So hope to see you all again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.